Thank you. Yes, so I'm very happy to be here to be with you all in this session. I've been given a very strict directive by Dr. Madhavi. Tilgul ghya ani spashta bola. So now I'm going to have to do some plain talking. But before I start, I would request my colleague, Dr. Vivian Amonkar, to share the screen with some slides which I will base my talk on. So if you can give yes. Oh, that's nice. Yes. So we can go on to the slideshow. And thank you, Dr. Vivian. And I will begin now with this. Here you can see that I'm talking about internal quality assessment systems in the new normal. And that's, of course, the topic of your seminar and workshop. We go on to the next slide. So I'm looking now to see what really is quality. Otherwise, we talk quite a lot about this quality, excellence, etc. I want to see now what do we mean by quality. And I've given you three different possibilities there. One is provoking critical thinking and creativity. Then we also talk of quality as the all-round formation of the human person. It's not just the intellect. It's all of us, all our qualities, all those need to be given the opportunity to develop. Only then we are really educated. And then, of course, we can narrow down onto values which are conveyed through the processes, the behavior, the choices made in the campus itself, in the institution itself. So values. Okay, so I'm sure you will add some more, but I wanted to single out these three, which I think are important, they stand out. Now, therefore, what do we understand by quality in education? Okay, if you will add whatever you think is quality, that will help us to understand it better, or you can maybe amplify the concept more. We'll go to the next slide. And here I think I'm saying that spashta bolण्याचा जो अधिकार मिळाला मला, that I'm saying that quality has gone all wrong in our educational system. Because these are the questions I'd like to ask. What type of education have we been giving if in populations with a higher rate of education, the infant gender ratio has fallen? So the female number has gone down. We have seen this in the 2011 census in comparison with previous census. And these are in areas where education has taken off in a better way in our country. And yet there has been this gender selection. So is that any type of education that you would like to agree to? This is my question. Or I think we've all heard this sentence thrown at us time and again. Education has led to unemployable graduates. So we're teaching them something, but it's of really no use to them in the real world because most of them remain unemployed then. We are not giving them the qualities or the capacities to really make a mark in the world and even to earn a living. This has been thrown at us even by industrialists. I once had one of our eminent industrialists to come to. In fact, therefore, education, Paulo Freire says, can serve as a propaganda for the ruling classes. The ruling classes will decide how society should be, and the education system gears young people into that system, which obviously privileges them, the ruling classes themselves. And so, in other words, education can train people to fit like cogs into the wheel of a society that is very oppressive. And I think the world over, we have a very oppressive society. And in India, we are no different. In fact, we might be worse than many other parts of the world. Just click once more. However, education also can be the opposite. So I've been taking the negative, but let's look also at the positive. Education brings massive changes in human well-being. We are very clear about that. This has happened over the centuries. And education, therefore, can and must spark the creative flame in each one of us so that we do something creative to cater to a better world. That's what education is about. So contrast the two, what I've just mentioned, what has education produced in our country? What does Paulo Freire say? Is this true in our country and in our educational system? And contrast it with what it should be. Is it what we are talking about? They're really contributing to human well-being? And is it sparking that creative flame in our students? Next slide. Our colleges, therefore, we have to acknowledge, deal with very precious human resources. Our students are really a resource that you cannot get anywhere else in the world. We have a wonderful set of students with great potential, and a good college makes a significant impact on students. I'm sure all of us teachers have experienced, ex-students meeting us somewhere in maybe different parts of the world and telling us, what a difference you or the college or the system made to their lives. So a good college can make a very significant difference in the lives of students, and therefore the responsibility for us. In fact, psychologists affirm that it's not really the one-to-one communication between the student and the teacher that's important, but the whole atmosphere and the interaction that we generate between the peer group and, of course, between teacher and students, that whole atmosphere of interaction, that is where internalization of values and attitudes happens. And so the experience that we give our students, the overall impact on them is so very crucial. And that's, I think, what we have to appreciate a little bit more than we seem to be doing, because our education system does require some changes. Next slide. And here we come to the crucial point that I would like to make. My topic has been titled Motivation for Good Quality Teaching and Learning. So the faculty commitment is absolutely crucial, because it is the faculty that is really dealing directly with the students, not the management. And it is the faculty that builds up that atmosphere and facilitates interaction. And so faculty commitment is very crucial. Now, if we'll go to, just click, Dr. Vivian, we go through these points, you will find them very familiar. Faculty commitment is all right, but what about, such a heavy workload, 20 lectures a week or 18 or whatever? But that's still a very heavy workload. And that is also lectures and interaction sessions with a demanding student group. If the group of students is just sitting quiet and doing nothing, then of course that first of all is not education. And then of course it won't be much of a demand on you as teachers. But most of our colleges and our classes have demanding student groups if you get them involved. And that's another pressure on you. I've had students coming into my class and knowing more about the topic than I knew, because they happen to manage to get one of the latest books on the subject. And so they were a step ahead of me. So that happens, and I'm so thrilled that a thing like that happens, because then we learn, then the resource is shared with me, I update what I could not have got, a student has managed to get. So you see, a demanding student group has both. the negative and the positive is what we should talk about or emphasize. But that again puts pressure on us. Then we have co-curricular, extracurricular activities to generate and to monitor. Each of us has to do some research and even come up with research publications. You have family responsibilities. There are large classes for continuous evaluation. That is, if most of you all, I do think, will have continuous evaluation. So you can see that pressure is there. In St. Xavier's, since we are in South Mumbai, most of our faculty came from North Mumbai. And therefore, they had the rigors of travel. And once in a way, you would have a teacher coming to class injured because he or she had a hard, rough time in the train and actually had a small injury. So you can see that the faculty, all of us are under tremendous pressure. Now, if we are under such pressure, can we come up with quality? That's my question to all the teachers. Do you think with all this that is impinging on you, pressing on you, can you really talk about quality? That's the question all of us have to ask. Next slide, please. And if you'll keep clicking. So my question is, the key is motivation. What will motivate faculty? So, of course, the normal reasons are there. A reasonable salary, remuneration. Then the fact that we are professionals, that gives us professional ethics. Then some of us, or many of us, if not most, have taken up teaching as a vocation. So it's really coming from within. We have motivation from within. Then you have student acknowledgement, which is really something that we all enjoy. Not just acknowledgement of students in the class, but even, as I mentioned, students and parents outside the classroom and much beyond their tenure in class, in the college. That also gives us a great deal of motivation because it means that we are doing something that is worthwhile. And all of us want to have a meaningful life. So doing something worthwhile is a great motivation. And of course, there are career advancement avenues. That is also something that will motivate us. We go to the next slide and we'll take one or two more. So again, what will motivate the faculty to own the institution? Because that's the type of motivation that I'm talking about. So here, monitoring and accountability from the management and of course, even peer team monitoring would be useful to give us better motivation. Being given the freedom to develop ideas, to develop your own concepts, your own idea of education, your own idea of the subject you're teaching, the interdisciplinary inputs, being given that freedom to develop is something wonderful. And that's what we tasted when we took autonomy at St. Xavier's many years ago, 2010. The freedom to develop our own curriculum, that was really of a great motivating force. And then, of course, all of us like acknowledgement of our efforts. So, my friends, I'm saying that this is key. And do you think this comes from outside or does this come from within? That's the question. Is it something that you can generate from within or you have to wait till it comes from outside? Because many of these points were really things that, have to come from outside also. However, even that thing of giving freedom to develop ideas, I found a great number of faculty when I took over as principal at St. Xavier's. A huge number of faculty were finding their ways of getting their own freedom, academic freedom. I'm talking of in a positive way, because they have used their own creativity to work up a system that was not present in the university at that time. So if some of you are familiar with St. Xavier's, the faculty started what we called the honors program. It's not the management. Management gave support. There's a group of faculty who started it, and that also only from a few departments. The other departments said, no, we don't want all this extra work. But you know what happened? Those few departments starting it gave it such a good reputation that the students who were profiting from it conveyed that to students who didn't have the honors program in their departments. And they, of course, began to demand it from their faculty. And finally, the whole college took up the honors program, a program of academic excellence, which has given St. Xavier's such a great image, not only in India, but even abroad in academic institutions abroad. Now, see, this is all before autonomy. When we did not have autonomy, we did not have the freedom. But our faculty found ways of going and getting, a better system going. And you can see, therefore, it is really self-motivation that is so important if we want quality in our colleges and in higher education. Next slide. So here we go on, if you click, we'll go on to see internationally, higher education has changed drastically. And so the question once again is, can our colleges in India make that grade? Are our managements really serious about education? And are our faculty motivated enough to take quality to a higher level? That's the question that we need to answer before we go into any, methodologies of getting quality. And that's why I titled this presentation as, the motivation for quality. Because that's without that, you're not going to have any quality. You'll go through the motions. And I'll show you that further on, there are lots of things that you can do, which is just, for the sake of form, but no real quality there. It's just, are we interested in giving the best to our students, which is available internationally abroad? If we are, then the ways are quite simple. It's a commitment. We have to be committed. It will be an effort and not an effort of an individual. It has to be an effort of groups. Maybe not the whole group, but not the whole faculty, because I happen to be from the Department of Sociology. And I can tell you that social change, human change doesn't happen like that. Unanimous. There's a small group that, starts, then it spreads to a few others. And then, of course, it might have a wider impact. So I've had faculty in St. Xavier's who have absolutely no motivation. And whatever the principal, everybody else did, they would do whatever absolute minimum they can get away with. Nothing really that we can do about that, except put a thought of quality and a motivation for quality into their minds and hearts. And then when they see the results of quality, I think they will be motivated for that. So can our colleges in India make the grade? You, my dear colleagues, teachers, I think that is a question you have to answer. So next slide. Here you'll see some fireworks. That fireworks is not for Sankranti, but that is to show that when have changes happening in any human situation, there is a lot of enthusiasm, so fireworks, but there's also a lot of conflict. And so restructuring in higher education in our colleges is something that is so crucial today. And it will bring a great deal of fervor and enthusiasm. It will also bring a lot of conflict. And we have to contend with both. But the point I'm making here at the end of this slide, or at the bottom of the slide, is this. We are talking about the new normal now, after the wane, perhaps, of the COVID pandemic. Well, this new normal, or rather the situation of the pandemic has changed the whole situation for us. It's given us almost a new opportunity to build up systems. And therefore, the new normal is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for quality. It's also an opportunity for very, very degraded education. And you can take it as you are motivated to. But the new normal is an opportunity for good academics. The next slide. So, my friends, I am now going to talk a little bit about embedding quality into the structure. Because quality is not just, a lecture, you prepare a lecture well and deliver it. No, it's a system. And within the system, quality has to be structured. It has to be embedded. And so the concern for quality requires to be embedded in the structure and the functioning of the education system. In other words, in the teaching learning pedagogy and in the evaluation system. These two go hand in hand. Again, to go back, if you don't mind, I will use the example of St. Xavier's, because that's the only college I've taught in. I don't know in depth the other colleges, although I've had a lot of experience. But to give you something that St. Xavier's has had, I think is worthwhile, because you could take it as a case study that I'm presenting, having been at St. Xavier's for so many years and also being the principal for quite a long time. So I was pointing out that the teaching learning pedagogy has to go with the evaluation system. And before autonomy, our teachers were very, very constrained by the evaluation system. The evaluation system was straitjacketed. And as I mentioned earlier, very much of rote learning required from that. There are no innovative questions. I remember being on boards of study, etc. And when you look at setting questions, you look at the previous questions, previous year's questions, maybe 10 years. And sometimes you take a question from there and put it into this, your present syllabus, your present paper, right? And sometimes even a grammatical mistake is taken from a previous paper and put into the present one. So that's the type of evaluation system, unfortunately, we have had. Not everybody has been like that, but quite a bit it has been so. And if you ask an innovative question, immediately the moderator would say, most of our students will not be able to answer that. So the evaluation system is so important for the type of teaching and learning pedagogy that you do. And that is the reason why both have to go hand in hand. And in an autonomous system, you have that very much possible. However, even in the non-autonomous system, there are ways of getting that done, and not as well as in an autonomous system, but it's still possible. And so how do we embed quality into the structure and functioning of the education system? That's the question I'm going to deal with in the next few minutes. Next slide, please. Now here, this slide actually belongs to the presentation of Dr. Amonkar. I have dragged it into my presentation, and I'm sure Dr. Amonkar doesn't mind. She has given me permission to use this. But the point I'm making here, and she'll make it later again perhaps, is that this has already started in India. The fact that in pre-primary, you can see that this is an advertisement for an international school in Mumbai. And already from the pre-primary, they are talking about the use of the Bloom's taxonomy, multiple intelligences, etc. Already from the lower KG, junior KG. Now, this is the type of revolution that is happening in some sections of our educational system, mainly the international schools. Is it happening in our higher education? That's the question. So my next slide. So that's just a motivation to say that it's already happening. Now, what therefore should our education system do? It must generate critical reflection through a pedagogy of context. So you start with the context, you generate reflection that goes into action, and the action feeds back into reflection, and you have therefore a circle which takes you to higher levels of quality. Now, this is the type of pedagogy that we require, critical reflection. Next slide. This will, just click more. This will, this is what our students require. Effectiveness in the teaching learning process means prodding students to make meaning from what they learn, not just to learn it so that they know it. But what does that mean? So that they can ask questions, prod students to ask questions, to extract knowledge from whatever they have already learned, to apply it to a new context, and therefore to actually create new knowledge. When you apply knowledge to a new context, you are creating new knowledge. Go further. And therefore, you reach then an intellectual depth that cuts through the superficiality rampant in modern culture. Our culture is the cell phone culture. And as I mentioned earlier, you can Google up almost anything. Now, what you get, that's the question, because you get such a plethora of answers. What is right? What is worthwhile? What is valuable? That you have to make your own critical evaluation of, isn't it? So you need to reach an intellectual depth which cuts through that superficiality that Google and the social media, etc., has sort of immersed us in. This is the effectiveness in the teaching learning process we have to aim for. If you are agreeable with this, if this is what you are trying to do, then my next point would be, and the next slide will be, how do we go about this in a systematic manner? So we'll go on to the next slide. Those are the higher order skills really that we are talking about. Getting people to question, etc., then leads you to the higher order skills, and we'll come to that again a little later. We have to also look at the changing ways of young people, because when we were students, just click further, when we were students, that was not the situation that we have now. Very different, as we all will acknowledge. So we have a Harvard study some years ago which said that among students and in general, the level of curiosity is declining. The students are not questioning now. They are not, they are not curious. They're not eager to learn something more. They absorb whatever comes. That's all. Next. They're also used very much to audiovisual stimulation. So if you don't have any audiovisual stimulation in your classes, in your lectures, you'll find them tuning off. Not because you are uninteresting so much, but because now they're not used to this type of stimulation for a long time. They'll 5, 10, 15 minutes, they'll manage to weather it out. Beyond that, it becomes very difficult for them because audiovisual stimulation is the norm. Next. They are also accustomed, therefore, to the internet as the medium. Now, these are two things that we have to look at to see, can we use these to good purpose if we want quality in our education? Can we use the audiovisual and can we use the internet? And of course, now with the so-called new normal, we have to use the internet. We don't have an option. Next slide, please. Yes. So now coming to how do we structure quality into the teaching learning system. The teaching learning methodologies, there are several, and I'm sure Dr. Sybil and others from the education field have already spoken about different types. Now, when St. Xavier's took up autonomy, a number of our teachers began to say, what is the system that we should adopt? And Dr. Amonkar did a lot of study of this, and she also went abroad to the universities abroad to see what were they using. And finally, we decided to use the Bloom's taxonomy for the teaching, learning, and evaluation process. And what was this Bloom's taxonomy meant to do? To teach the higher order skills. Here you have the higher order skills: critical thinking, creativity, problem solving. So very much like what I just said in the previous slide, prod students to ask questions, prod students to make new knowledge, to understand and apply to different situations. That's the higher order skills. Now, you might be surprised to note that this quote that I'm giving here is from the UGC itself. Normally, you don't think that the UGC will come up with something, so very sharp. But we've got some very nice articulation of the goals of education in many UGC documents. And this is one that I like. If our students do not pick up these higher order skills in higher education, all the memorization and reproduction will be in vain in the global society and economy. That's where you get those unemployable graduates. We don't really need to give them too much of information, too much of knowledge, but they have to be taught how to critically evaluate all the plethora of information that is available to us today. They have to be critically thinking. They have to use things in creative ways. They have to move from one discipline to another. And therefore, this is what we have to focus on. Now, my friends, let us just take a moment break. Is the system, I'm not saying individual teachers, is the system that we have been following in our colleges in Mumbai and across the country, is it really emphasizing the higher order skills, or is it emphasizing the lower order skills, which is information and maybe some understanding of that information? Without going into application, without going into synthesis, without going into creativity, that is what we have to understand, that we have to make a shift now. Our education system and the higher education system in particular definitely has to restructure and make the shift from the lower order skills, which are important, but not as important today as the higher order skills, which is what I've just mentioned. Next slide. If you agree with this, then we are moving from, that system of education, which is like the banking system. The teacher has all the resources, all the money, intellectual money, and transfers it to the students. That's the banking system. Today, we cannot have that anymore. As I've mentioned, you have to have the constructivist and learner-centric model. Now, again, these are, jargon which we all use. We are all learner-centric. We are all doing the constructivist model. How do we really show it's happening in practice in a structured manner, in a systematic manner? And that's why at St. Xavier's, we adopted the systematized adoption of the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, in the last few years, we realized that UGC itself has adopted the Bloom's taxonomy. And so none of our colleges can avoid, if you want to do well with the UGC and the NAC, etc., you cannot avoid the Bloom's taxonomy, right? But when we took it up in 2010, there was no such requirement. And so this is what we genuinely felt will bring good results for our teaching and for our students. And so the systematized adoption of the Bloom's taxonomy, I will start by giving you an inkling of one way in which it can be done, because that's the way that we did it already and got much fruit of that. And Dr. Amonkar will amplify all that in the next session. So it means the systematized adoption of the Bloom's taxonomy means the application of the development of higher order cognitive skills in the teaching learning pedagogy. So let's go on to the next slide because I'll explain this again later. So the Bloom's taxonomy is a classification of the different learning objectives that educators set for students. Learning objectives, educational objectives. What are these? These are in 3 domains. The affective, so has to do with our emotions. So you remember we had to, quality means the whole person. So the emotions, the psychomotor, which means movement and our skills, and the cognitive is, of course, the intellectual. Now, focus on all these 3 domains creates that holistic form of education. We are going now into the cognitive because that is the bulk of our education in colleges. The cognitive area is what we deal with mostly, the intellectual. And so here Bloom's has now several different levels of cognitive learning. So let's go to the next slide. This shows that the cognitive domain requires several different intellectual skills. Next, please. Yes. So here, this is these are 2 ways of looking at it. On the left, you will find the classical Bloom's taxonomy, which is a hierarchical system of objectives. Okay. So the first one is gaining knowledge. Second is comprehension. Third is application. Then you have analysis, synthesis, and the highest order skill is evaluation. These are in the cognitive domain. These are the different hierarchical skills. That's what Bloom's came up with. Another way of looking at it is to make it more action-oriented. So some others have said instead of knowledge, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and finally creating. Those are the skills that we have to attempt to give to our students, or to get to initiate our students to acquire for themselves in the teaching learning process. And then, of course, we have to examine it in the evaluation. So now here I'm coming up with a system that we used, which can be checked. Otherwise, as a teacher, I will say, I might start with knowledge, but very soon I go to comprehension, application, and my classes are so much of synthesis and evaluation and creating. I'm a very creative teacher. I'm a good teacher. I agree. There are some who are naturally that way. But do you want a system to be impregnated, embedded with quality, or do you want only a few flashy, good teachers? Because all of us are not excellent teachers naturally. We learn that as a skill. And that's why the application in a structured manner of the Bloom's taxonomy helps us to reach all these different skills with our students. First of all, for ourselves, and then with our students. You see on the top there, the title is Need for Collaboration. And the point I'm making here is an experiential point, that we cannot do this as individual teachers. We can't do that. We have to do it in collaboration, in dialogue, in cooperation with other teachers, mainly from the discipline, but even interdisciplinary. And so that shaking of hands, that collaboration, absolutely important if you want to build up a system of quality, reaching all these higher level skills and the higher order qualities in teaching that Bloom talks about, and that we know are so essential for our world today. The next slide. So therefore, the evaluation and the assessment is the clue. I've mentioned earlier that both the teaching, learning and the evaluation, they go hand in hand. You cannot have very creative, higher order skills in the teaching learning process and then not evaluate it. Or you cannot have very good higher order skills evaluated or put in the evaluation and it's not taught. The two have to match. And so to assess the extent the objectives of the curriculum are achieved through the implementation of the curriculum, you have to have a structure for evaluation and for assessment. And the same thing has to have a counterpart in the teaching learning process. So we go to the next slide, and I'm coming now to the end, because this is the system that Dr. Amonkar actually, in collaboration with some of our teachers, worked out for St. Xavier's. And you will see here now that we have this grid. And this is a grid which gives you, this is for any one paper that we are teaching, okay, any one course. So you have the units or topics on the left-hand side, and then you have these higher order skills going from lower order to the higher order. And you have to decide for each course and for each question that you ask, what is the level that you want to reach? So let's go ahead, Dr. Munkar. Yes, so suppose you have 3 units or chapters in your course. Okay, so you have topic 1 or unit 1, 2, 3. You can go to 4 and 5 depending on your syllabus. So then you have, this is now, suppose this is a first year course. Okay, so the first year you have to have a lot of information conveyed. Your initial courses have to be conveying of information. So you have, out of a 20-mark collection of questions, you have 10 marks for knowledge or remembering, you have 5 for understanding, and maybe you'll give 5 for applying. Analyzing, evaluating, creating, etc. You cannot reach in that first topic. We go on to the second topic, you might decrease a little bit of the remembering and go on to understanding and a little bit more for applying. Again, you still do not have the choice of analyzing and creating because you're still developing the course. So the third, yes, we go on to the third topic. There you will be able to reach something of analyzing. Now, this is a first year course. What would you do for a third year course? If you're in the undergraduate system, what would you do for the third year course? Would you have such a high weightage that is, no, please go back. Would you have such a high weightage for remembering, that is 26 out of 60? That's a high percentage, right? Or would you give less for remembering and then begin to go towards the higher order skills? Now, this you have to already decide at the beginning of the course. You know your course. You know the curriculum, the syllabus. So you have to say, what will I be able to achieve realistically with my students as far as the higher order skills are concerned? And already have this at the beginning before you start the course along with the syllabus. And you can even make this available to your students because they need to know what levels you are reaching at, you're going to be trying to achieve. So if you have this for yourself at least, then you have an aim to do this in your teaching learning. This will be, of course, in the evaluation. Next. So you see there you have a system which is very systematic, and you can gauge, are you reaching the higher order skills in your teaching, learning and evaluation or not? If you find, no, you're struggling, then you might have to go to the lower order skills at the beginning and then aim to go to higher order skills. So this is the topic, this is the task for every teacher in the teaching and learning or teaching of the course and evaluation. So my friends, I'm coming to the end. This is my second last slide. So the key to success in our colleges, I go back to that faculty motivation. And I'm saying it's the faculty's ability to recognize the sacredness of the task of education. We are not just doing any type of job. We all know what teachers do. We are really making the future. And this is in a very real way. This is not a cliche. You are having an impact on students that will make the future. If you inspire the students, for example, to good ecological sensitivity, the world has a chance. If you don't, the world does not have a chance. It's dependent on us. So to recognize the sacredness of the task, next, we go. For that, we have to learn new pedagogies. We cannot continue with the old pedagogies. Remember, what is the type of student that we have? Internet-oriented, audiovisual, etc. You cannot have just teaching chalk and talk in class. It's not possible. Of course, that is there. The component of that is important, but you cannot keep to that. So you have to learn new pedagogies which are suitable for young people growing up in this digital world. Next. In higher education lies the key to true development of our country. That we will all agree on. So let me go on to the final slide. And then if there are 5 minutes of questions, maybe I could take those. Okay. So the quality, I would say, therefore, is evident. It has to be present in the teaching learning pedagogy. I've given you some ideas of that. Dr. Monkar will give you some more. Actually, these things need to be taken up in a workshop. But I'm giving you a taste of what is possible, what might be desirable. Some of you might find it desirable. So the teaching learning pedagogy, important. You need clear outcomes. Dr. Sibyl has, I'm sure, been very clear about that. You need structured processes. That's the point I'm making, and you will find Dr. Monkar making too. Structured processes. You cannot leave it to creativity of the moment. It has to be within a structure. You need a lot of peer collaboration. I spoke of that. Importance finally has to be given to each student. You need lead examples. You need a monitoring mechanism. And all this will add up to a creative ethos, a culture on campus. With this, you will find quality happening. So my last slide. Next. This is an opportunity in the new normal, an opportunity for creating competence so that you get students who are really competent in their subject. That is, they are critically aware and able to be creative with the subject matter or with the discipline. You need also conscience, and there again, critical thinking is so important. And finally, you need commitment. If the teacher shows commitment to the teaching learning process, you will find that being passed on to the students. They learn commitment from us. So this is our vocation. This is the opportunity we have. And I think the new normal, since it has disrupted everything, it gives us a chance to build up again. And if we build up in the right manner, we'll be doing the future a great favor. Thank you for listening so intently.